After much deliberation on a project for the Learn Something New assignment, I decided that I would learn how to sew. The last time I sewed, I was in middle school, and I even remember making a stuffed cow. Though I do not remember how I actually did so. I had what Piaget described as schema about sewing. As I continued learning, I was able to make connections from what I was learning to previous knowledge from my middle school days. With the suggestion of my coworker Amy, I decided to check out a local fabric and yarn store. Meet Harmony. Harmony is a fabric and yarn store in an old home in Provo, Utah, built in 1878. The owner, Laura, greeted me and gave me some information about various classes offered at Harmony. She later sent me an email that said there was room in the Harmony's beginning sewing class. I was delighted. On my first day of class at Harmony, I nervously walked into the back door of the home. There was a table set up in the kitchen with 4 sewing machines and another odd-looking machine. I found out later it was a serger. The instructor, Michelle, greeted me by name and introduced me to the other students. That was about the extent of our conversation, as they pulled out their own projects they were working on and began to sew at their own sewing machines. Through the lens of Wanger's Landscape of Communities, at that moment I met a new community. I had a choice of how much to go into it, and for me, in that moment, how welcome I felt had an impact on how much I wanted to be a part of what the other students were doing. Michelle asked me if we were starting from the beginning. I told her that I was. She then told me to pick out some small, pre-cut pieces of fabric. I then waited for her instruction as she helped the other members of the class. This continued throughout the class. She would give me some instructions, have me do it, and then I would wait until she told me what else to do. In this scenario, I experienced Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. The problem-solving I could do on my own was limited. However, my potential capabilities, with the assistance of another, more capable person, Michelle, was much greater. The first step she showed me had to do with the bobbin. That word sounded familiar. She explained to me about how to put thread on the bobbin and thread the machine. I felt very grateful for the little background knowledge I had. I was entering what Guy would describe as a semiotic domain in the area of sewing, and I had to learn the literacy associated with this domain, like the terms bobbin and serger. The instructor referenced several times my previous experience sewing in middle school and was very encouraging about how I was doing. Without knowing it, she was applying some metacognitive teaching strategies of drawing out and working with the pre-existing understanding that I brought with me. By the end of the first class, I had sewn and stuffed my very first pincushion. I was very proud. The next week, I went to Joann's to pick up 2.5 yards of fabric for my next project, pajama bottoms. When I walked into Joann's, I felt completely overwhelmed. I experienced a bit of cognitive overload. So many products, so many choices, and I did not know what to do with any of the material. During my second class, I walked into the back door of the house, a bit more confidently this time. Michelle got out her pattern and explained how to use it. I was a little lost. I found that showing me what to do rather than telling me what to do worked better for me. I experienced some social learning as I learned through observation, direct instruction, and modeling from the teacher. She helped take measurements that explained why those numbers coincided with the size of pattern. After a little coaching from the teacher, she left me on my own to pin and cut the fabric. I was so nervous to cut the pattern and fabric, and I found myself hesitant, but soon gave more confidence in my cutting skills. This experience reminded me of components of Colin's cognitive apprenticeship: modeling, demonstrating procedural knowledge, coaching, giving feedback and hints, and scaffolding. However, there were no articulation, reflection, or exploration in this example. I also experienced Wanger's legitimate peripheral participation watching the other students as a newcomer, though I did not make it to an old-timer fade. I thought my pajama bottoms were going to take a class or two, but boy was I wrong. As I continued to sew and hem and iron, I felt more confident as I learned the distinctive set of social practices of the semiotic domain to participate effectively. The day I finished the class, I came from a flag football championship game. I walked into my sewing class, sweaty, with my cleats on. At that moment, I realized that I related more closely with the women on my flag football team compared to the women in my sewing class. I did not feel as though that I took on the identity of the seamstress. Though, for that day, I was a championship seamstress, I suppose. At the end of the class, I had some fabric to complete other projects. As my class ended, my teacher showed her expert advice as she recognized meaningful patterns of information that applied in all domains. She explained to me that I would apply some of the same skills I just used in my pajamas on other projects. At that moment I understood what she was trying to explain to me. However, after a few weeks my novice skills were very apparent, as I could not apply the patterns of information to a new setting. I would not feel comfortable sewing much of anything without the help of the teacher. In the end, I felt very proud of my accomplishments in sewing pajama bottoms. I even let some of my friends try them on for size, too.